Welcome to this second lecture on designing surveys. After this lecture, students will be able to appraise the different ways of asking questions on a survey and construct appropriate, valid, and reliable survey questions. So when we're designing surveys, we need to keep in mind that surveys are social occasions. There is a social interaction going on. This means that respondents will look for subtle or tacit cues on which to base their answers. Respondents want to look good in the eyes of the person giving the survey, and they will look for clues as to how to make the person giving the survey happy. Different wordings, images, or formats may convey different implied desires on the part of the researcher or the person giving the survey. Surveys also require that respondents understand the questions, can retrieve the relevant information from their own memory, formulate a response, and then communicate that response. So it takes a lot out of respondents to get a survey, be able to read or listen to that survey, and provide the appropriate responses. So when we're designing surveys, particularly survey questions, we should think about how to best communicate what we want. Survey questions should be clear and understandable, using appropriate vocabulary for our population. Appropriate vocabulary here means that we're using the language that the person speaks, and we're using vocabulary or words that the person or respondent taking the survey will understand. We should not use any ambiguous language. We should be specific and direct for the most part, and our questions should be non-biased. We should avoid what are called leading questions, or questions with a biased wording that will encourage respondents to answer in a particular way. For example, asking a question about, do you support the woke policies of whoever? Or do you support the racist policies of whoever? These questions have an implied morality to them and are therefore leading or biased questions that we should avoid. We should focus on one idea or concept at a time. Avoid what are called double-barreled questions, or questions that ask about two or more ideas in the same question. For example, if I asked you, what do you think of the content or length of the videos in this course? You may not know whether to respond to the implied question about the length or the implied question about the content. Instead, I should ask you one question about the length and one question about the content of the videos. We need to be specific and detailed in our questions, but not so detailed that the respondent gets bored or loses interest, and in general we should consider the knowledge of our respondents. If we're asking a set of questions to college-educated people, we can use one set of language, one set of information, but if we're asking questions to, say, children, be maybe a little bit less detailed and a little bit less difficult in our questions. There are two main types of questions that we can ask in a survey. The first is open-ended questions, also called free response questions. These might be similar to, say, a essay question or a short answer question on an exam, and it requires the respondents to answer the question in their own words, either by typing it out, writing it out, or speaking it out. This may introduce error because the length of responses may vary. It requires the respondent to be literate in some fashion usually, and respondents may be hesitant to respond honestly, and it requires more work from the researchers who have to go through and categorize or code the responses. Close-ended questions, on the other hand, are also known as fixed choice questions, so think the multiple choice question on an exam, provides answers from which the respondent can choose from. And good close-ended questions are difficult to develop from the researcher's perspective. It's easy to forget important responses, such as including a don't know choice, a no response choice, or an other fill-in-the-blank choice. In addition, we can use what is called a Likert response format, where respondents rate a statement on a scale from strongly agree to strongly disagree, with a neutral response such as neither agree or disagree. So it might be something like strongly agree, neither agree or disagree, disagree, and strongly disagree as the responses. When we're choosing between open versus close-ended questions, we need to pay attention to what we want to get out of the survey and the question, the level of information possessed by respondents on that topic. So if the respondent doesn't have a lot of information or doesn't necessarily have a lot of knowledge about that particular topic, we probably want to veer closer to those close-ended questions. However, if we're asking a question that we think respondents should know a lot about or have a lot of information about, then we can go towards that open-ended question. We also need to pay attention to how well respondents' opinions are thought out or structured. So again, if they've put a lot of thought into something, then we can ask that more open-ended question. But if we are suspicious that the respondent hasn't put a lot of thought into this particular topic, then we want to stay toward those close-ended questions. We also need to think about the motivations of the respondents. Respondents who are more motivated are more likely to answer those open-ended questions, whereas respondents who aren't as motivated are not likely to answer those open-ended questions, and we want to veer towards those close-ended questions. So in general, we want to cater open versus closed based on the level of motivation and knowledge that the respondents have. For the most part in our surveys, we're going to be asking what are called direct questions. Direct questions are questions which there's a clear, direct relationship between the question that's being asked and what the researcher wants to know. So this may be something as simple as, what is your age? What is your race? What is your gender? Those are direct questions. However, occasionally we are going to ask questions about a topic that is particularly sensitive and where we want to potentially hide the goal of that question. In this case, we're going to want to use what are called indirect questions. Indirect questions are questions where the link between the objectives that we have for that question and the question itself is less obvious. We can do this in a couple of ways. The first way is to use what is called a hypothetical, where instead of asking you a question, such as, how do you feel about this topic, we ask you how your friends or how your coworkers feel about that topic, with the idea that you will project your own views onto that of that coworker or friend. Or we can also, with these indirect questions, ask around the topic. So rather than asking, say, are you sexist, right, which everybody's going to say no to, we can ask, do you think men have more of a right to a job than women? Do you think it's more important for men to have a college degree than women? Do you think that women should stay at home and take care of the kids more than men? These questions are all getting at ideas around sexism without directly asking, how sexist are you? Sometimes we have questions that only apply to a specific group of people. In order to avoid having people answer these questions where it doesn't matter to them, we use what are called filter and contingency questions. Filter questions are used to filter respondents for the contingency questions. So examples here might be, do you smoke? If yes, we ask them questions about how many cigarettes they smoke, how often they smoke, what their favorite brand is, etc. If they say no, then we move them to the next topic. And so these filter questions can be used to weed out people who don't want to or need to answer these questions, and only have the people who we want to get this information from answer the questions. So the contingency questions are questions that apply only to a particular group of respondents. So it may target a specific demographic such as smokers, divorcees, females, LGBTQ folks, etc. Here are some other things we need to keep in mind when we're writing survey questions. First is that respondents will tend to answer questions in the direction of social desirability. People are not going to want to openly say that they're racist or sexist or have a opposing viewpoint to you. Respondents also tend to agree with questions more often than they disagree. And so we need to phrase questions so that it presents both sides of a particular topic, so that both sides sound empathetic and understanding, and it allows and gives permission to the respondents to answer in either direction. When we're writing a survey, it's important to both have good questions, but also have a good organization to the entire survey. The organization of a survey will impact how respondents interpret, feel, respond to the questions. Here are some general rules. First is we want to start the survey with a cover letter introducing the survey and providing informed consent. Then we can begin with some easy non-threatening questions about age, gender, education, etc. We don't want to start with open-ended questions or likely response questions that require respondents to think or are particularly difficult. We want to start with those easier questions. And we want to move in chronological order, either from oldest to newest or newest to oldest. And we want to focus on one topic at a time. We don't want to jump around from topic to topic. And in general, we want to place those sensitive questions either in the middle of the survey or towards the end of the survey. It's important to keep in mind here that we have to worry about the respondent's memory and how much they can remember. It can be hard to recall detailed information on the spot, and memory can be inaccurate or biased. So, as designers of this survey, we can help with this by either shortening the reference period, such as instead of saying how many times have you been to the movie in the last year, we say how many times have you been to the movies in the last week or month. We can give respondents more time to think by having longer, redundant questions. So we can say, how many times have you been to the movie in the last month, or movie theaters in the last month? Asking the question kind of again. We can use retrieval clues by starting with broader questions and getting narrower. So we can start with things like, do you like going to the movies? Which is the closest movie theater to you? How many times have you been to that movie theater? By asking multiple questions, it gets the respondent's brain starting to work and maybe help with the retrieval of some of those memories. We can also use lists to help with retrieval of detailed information, such as providing a list of movies that have come out recently, or a list of movie theaters, something that helps get people thinking about that topic. We can also ask them to conduct a household survey or check their records if it's really important. Sometimes you don't even need to come up with new questions. In fact, it is often encouraged that you use questions that are already established or existing questions. And this is frequently the best and easiest approach because people have already designed questions that address your topic. And this is especially true if the survey that this question comes from is widely respected and widely used. One, it enables comparisons across studies, so we can compare your results to the results of other people who use these questions, but also why redesign something if there's already a good measurement of it out there. Alright, that's it for this lecture. Thank you for watching.